Toastmasters really gives me a good sense of who I'm speaking to tonight. And you know that one of the key things in Toastmasters that we is know your audience. So let me start and ask how many of you, and hands up, have actually done a storytelling event, have been part of an event either outside of the club or at work or in some place where you've given story. And I'm looking to see there's a couple of hands. Okay, very good. Well, you know, for those of you who haven't, and those of you who are kind of asking what is a storytelling event, let me start by saying that probably about 25 years ago, there was a revolution. And I know that revolution was not limited to the United States. It was really in many countries around the world, including Canada, where storytelling went from something that was sort of a dusty thing that happened maybe at craft fairs or at, in story rooms in the library to being something that was celebrated, and it was celebrated in such a way that it became part of the values that were seen as important in the business world. So, very interesting that nowadays, 25 years hence, we're seeing storytelling as being something uh, that is supported, that is uh, given importance in the world of business. And I would ask the question, why? Why is it important to be able to tell story? What is it that is different about story that becomes particularly important? And the answer is, because it's a rhetorical question, and you know that you're not supposed to necessarily ask rhetorical questions and without getting an expectation that people are going to answer you. But here we go. The thing about story is it gives us a personal sense of who a person is and the things that they have, that they're living with, the values that they hold dear, and it also takes us on on a journey in someone's lives. So this leads to a question which I actually am going to ask you to go off of mute if you have a response. I want you to think about the following question. Here it is. We are in a place called Toastmasters, where all of us are being trained and are learning through doing to do something called speeches. Wow. Okay, speeches. What is the difference? Here's the question. What is the difference between a speech and a story? Are they the same? Are they different? And I'm going to just ask anyone who has an answer to go off of mute and shout it out.
No.
Thoughts?
I think they can be both. Story and speech go together. My speeches are mostly stories.
Okay. Your speeches are mostly story.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between then a speech and a story?
Well, a story is okay, I'll do it again. One is make believe, right?
Interesting. One is make believe. Actually, that I would say is not true. I mean, yes, there are make believe stories. I mean, we know fairy tales are make believe. I think we know that fairy tales are make believe, but story can be very personal and can be very true. So I participated in an event that probably many of you have heard about called The Moth, and you may have heard about it because there is the Moth Radio Hour, and I know that one of our members here has a radio voice and is a radio man himself. But there's radio shows that really celebrate the art of story, and it's not fairy tale, but it's the art of true story, first person story. It's the art of narrative that is told oftentimes in the first person. And that's what we're going to do today, is to look at how do we actually create a narrative that comes from in here that's about this person, and you can take that finger and point it at yourself, and bring that voice that you have and that experience that you have, and bring that forth. To me, and I'm going to answer my own question, the difference between speech and story is really about the focus. And in story, where the focus is on the journey. It's the journey that we take our listeners, and we want to take them through a journey that is not only exciting, that shows challenges, but also provides reflection at the end. Okay. Speech can do so many different things. It's not that a speech can't do that, but oftentimes speech is at the service of learning. Speech is at the service of demonstrating. Speech is let's call it a broader category. Okay. Oftentimes, story really is not about giving a lesson, a moral. It's really what comes through that experience of listening to that 5 to 7 minutes or however long that story is. I encourage you, and I have in the handout a number of resources, of story resources that you can look at yourself to familiarize yourself with story. And I do not know whether or not in your community there are storytelling events. Wouldn't be surprised if there are. That there aren't. I would be more surprised. There certainly are in Regina, and I know that there are in other places in the province. So now that we kind of talked about story, I'm going to give you Todd's recipe for story. Now, what I mean by Todd's recipe for story is there is no recipe, right? There is no one way of telling a story. There are no rules. And in fact, if there were rules, they would all be for the breaking. But this is, I think, a fairly easy way to sort of think about story. It is a framework that can be used as we think about, what goes into a story. And for anyone who has taken classes in screenwriting or in fiction writing or in anything like that, you'll probably say, oh, well, sounds like there's some similarities here. And you know what? There are similarities between the craft of constructing a story and the craft of constructing any kind of piece of media that we consume all the time. Guaranteed that when you're watching a Netflix show or when you're watching any kind of drama, there is a framework, and that framework, as you know, probably goes from the challenge and to how did that person then overcome that challenge, to the twists and the turns, to the climax at the end. So here's Todd's 9 steps of storytelling, and then I'm going to tell a little story, and then we're going to go back through and we're going to work on sort of identifying where in my 3-minute story these different steps happened. So the first part is opening. And just like in a speech, the opening is designed to grab your attention. You want to do something in that opening where people are going to be riveted. And, it could be a moment, it could be a word, it could be something, a dramatic moment, just like we know from Toastmasters. The second part is the context setting. It's the W's. It's the where, the why, the what, the who, smashed together for time in a way that, again, gives us a picture in our mind of where we are and why we're there. What's going on? The next part, the third part, is the conflict. So and this is the central part of story is the conflict. what is it that was going on that that person wanted? Now, when I say conflict, you might be thinking, because of course I'm from the United States, guns and knife fights and people jumping off of bridges. But conflict, of course, can come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And oftentimes the conflicts that we have that we want to tell our stories about, hopefully, don't involve guns and knives and bridges. They could involve bridges, though. Conflict can be something small. It can be something emotional. And the interesting thing about conflict is there are oftentimes, and the best conflicts oftentimes have both external components and internal components. Think about it. We demonstrate that conflict in some way, but we also feel it in some way. And when we can identify what that is, that becomes the kernel upon which we actually build the framework, build our story. So that's the conflict. Next comes events. Events told in, of course, chronological order. First, what happened, second, what happened, third, what happened. And in those events, we're moving towards the next step, rising action. You get this sense that it's not just, we're not just walking down a garden road and walking down and there's a flower and there's another flower. No, there is this sense that that conflict that we've set up, we're moving towards something. And we're moving towards something that gives us a sense of energy. And that's what we want. And that energy then comes together in the climax. At the climax, we realize that this is it. This is the high moment in our story where that conflict that had been set up is somehow going to be resolved. And that's the next step, is the resolution. What, how did we actually resolve that conflict? And then the final step is reflection. What did it all mean? And that could, again, be a moment. It could be a word. It does not have to be a long, drawn out philosophical lesson. So those are the steps, fairly simple. As I said, there's no rules, there's no rhyme, but there is certainly, this is a good sort of starting framework for us to think about as we go through story. So I promised you that we would, that you would have an opportunity to listen to a quick story. And as I do this story, I want you to think about those steps that I just went through. And where in the story did those steps happen? And then we'll go back through and we'll identify them. Okay, New York, it's your turn. And look, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. There I was. It was 2017. I was on a microbus, a Mitsubishi microbus, going through twisting, turning roads in Guatemala. I had never been to Guatemala before, and frankly, I had all of a week and a half of Spanish under my belt. But that didn't stop me. In that bus were a whole group of guys and gals from Costa Rica. And of course, they only spoke one language, Spanish. Night had fallen, and everyone was singing songs. It was coming close to me, though, and they were going to ask me, what was I going to sing? There was a little bit of Shakira, a little bit of Maná. I didn't know those songs at that point, but I'm the kind of guy who likes to play along. was coming closer and closer because each one of the rows, each person on the row was singing a song. I was thinking, what is it that I am going to sing? Hey, New York, it's your song, your turn. The nervousness was palpable inside of me. What was I going to sing that they would even know? Suddenly, I realized. Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I want a brand new part of it. Everyone in the bus broke out into singing along. New York, New York. Suddenly, that feeling of feeling separate, feeling lonely, feeling like there was a barrier, a language barrier that I couldn't cross, disappeared as everyone was singing along with me. New York, New York. From that moment, I knew that even if I was in a different place and didn't know the language, if I had a little bit of Sinatra, I could connect with the world. End story. Thank you. Thank you. So there was, I don't know the timer, how long that story was, but I imagine it was something around 3.5 minutes. You know, we tell stories all the time in Toastmasters that are about that length. They're called table topics. And if we're good at them, then we win prizes. The difference between table topics, though, is oftentimes, again, a table topic is that service of answering a specific question. And the point is that we have the opportunity to construct story. It can be short, it can be long, and it takes us on a journey. How many of you, and again, show of hands, felt like you were on a little bit of a journey with me for those 3 minutes? Yeah? Okay, very good, very good. I think the sections were pretty clear. It was the opening. Hey, New York, it's your turn. There was the where, the who, the what on the bus in Guatemala, getting dark, bunch of gals from Costa Rica, everyone speaking Spanish. The conflict. What was I going to sing? How could I communicate? How was I going to be able to connect with these people when I didn't have any Spanish? The chronological, the order, we were going person by person through that bus. They were all singing songs. That sense of rising action, because it was coming closer to me and it was going to be my turn. Finally, the climax. What was I going to sing? Sinatra came into my mind, and then there was the resolution. Everyone sang along with me and made that connection. And then I reflected. A little bit of Sinatra goes a long, long way in this world. By the way, wasn't a fairy tale, absolute true story. Was it true word for word? Absolutely not. It was edited. It was edited for Woodland Toastmasters tonight, and that's fine. You know, it's your truth. And the most important thing is, and this is something that anyone who's done memoir writing will know, is what is that truth? In many ways, it's about the emotional truth. Again, if you think about what I said in terms of conflict, you have your external conflict and you have your internal conflict. You know, externally, there was this question of what was going to come out of my mouth. You know, what was that song that was coming out of my mouth? Internally, it was that feeling of disconnection, of feeling lonely, of feeling unconnected to a bunch of people who were speaking a different language. And why this is a particularly useful story and a powerful story. And certainly it could be constructed into a longer, even more elaborate story, is because both of those things are true simultaneously, the external and the internal. And so the truth that I'm talking about is an emotional truth. Wasn't so much that whether it was a curvy road or a straight road, whether it was a Mitsubishi bus or a Honda, who cares? But the truth is, there was an emotional truth, right? And that emotional truth was really about that sense of disconnection. And that emotional truth is indeed something that everyone can connect with. We've all been there. Doesn't matter if we've never left Saskatchewan or we've never been to Guatemala. We've all been there in one way or another. And that's really important, is to pick topics that are transcendent in some way. And they're going to be transcended through what that emotional experience is that comes along with the story. So I'm going to stop here now and ask that, and I'm not sure how many of you were able to get the handout. I know that Lynn had tried to distribute it to most of you. The handout has the structure of story on one side, and it has the Todd's story on I believe that's what on this copy in Guatemala on the other side. If you have it, what I want to do is to spend time looking at this side of the sheet. And that's where the workshop part of the thing. And again, we could probably spend 2 hours on this workshop, and I don't have that much time. But I want you to all start by just closing your eyes for a moment. And if you think about my Guatemala story, there was a moment of conflict. It was a moment of conflict, something that I wanted but couldn't get. And what I'm going to ask you to do is close your eyes, and it doesn't have to be the perfect thing, but maybe it's the first thing that comes to mind, something that is your conflict. And it will be an image. Where were you? Who were you with? What happened in that moment? And you may be struggling. You may have it. You may have 3 things. If you have 3 things, pick the first one. If you're struggling and saying, well, that's not good enough, it is good enough. Take that. Open your eyes and let's take a look at this workshop sheet. And you'll see that this provides the framework for sketching this out. There is the define your moment of conflict. Where did it happen? When was it? Who was there? What I needed and wanted. And the most important thing that I want you to write down, if you are writing anything at all, and I would love for you to write something, is your conflict statement. What I needed in that moment? But there was a but. For me, what I needed was, I needed some connection with these people who spoke another language, but I didn't speak Spanish. And the third thing you'll see on that sheet is, this is a fancy term, and maybe many of you probably know it, called in media res. And it simply means jump into the middle of the pool. And anyone who's heard good stories know that you don't start at the beginning. You often start at a time in which things already are happening. My story, I started at the place where they said, hey, New York, it's your turn. And you know that that's not where the story started. The story started with me getting on the bus and coming and all the rest of that. But, and I backed up a little bit. But in the case of this story, I jumped into the middle because it gives energy. And it also gets us closer to where that conflict is. So for yourself, in this workshop sheet, I would say, where is it that you would start your story? And I'm going to give you maybe a minute to write. And then I'm going to open it up to everyone and ask for those people who feel ready that they can maybe share. Great. Is there someone either in the room, in the Prince Albert room, or Emily, or Linda, or Jamie, or yeah, great, Emily. Jump in there. Nice to meet you, Emily.
Hi, nice to meet you.
What did you
Do you-
have?
Do you want me to go over my media res as well as my conflict
Yeah,
statement?
why don't you? Yes, you can. Where would you start your story? What's your conflict? Maybe go 3, 2, 1.
Alrighty. Where would I start? It started. My conflict statement, I needed a battery boost, but I was too nervous to ask anyone in the parking lot. And what I needed, was a battery boost. But I was too nervous, and this was a true story, and ended up calling someone, just waiting an hour there in the parking lot.
It's perfect. That's perfect. And again, that's for many of us, and it's it's so relatable. You needed the boost. You were nervous to ask someone. There was an outward and there was an inward. There was the external struggle. Engine didn't start. Internal struggle. Nervousness to just ask to talk to a stranger. Very relatable. That's great. And Emily, you could definitely turn that, whether it was a table topics or was it a small speech, you could definitely turn that into something. That's great. Anyone else? Derek, did you have something that you wanted to, that you were working on there, or?
Yeah, that's right there. Oh, yeah, that's right. Can't hear me. Yeah, I mean, I did have something very, very quickly. I didn't fill everything in. Fortunately, there, I just kind of defined my moment of conflict. So I don't know if you want me to share that. Or
Yeah, please share
Okay.
away.
Yeah, well, I mean, the moment of conflict is, it happened at work last week. And it just was one of those disagreements that I had with, with different people. And what I felt I needed or I wanted at the time was just for others to trust me, because I'm in a position of leadership at work. And I felt like that was being attacked. So,
That's great.
yeah. So,
And do you have a sense of how you would construct that into the story, that there would be a journey that you could take us along, and that that there would be a natural sort of resolution to that, to the frame around what was there?
oh boy.
I know that's a lot of questions.
That is a lot, yeah. I mean, I think to me, like I would want to. I feel that I would want to start with how I was feeling. Like there's kind of that lack of trust or feeling that area, of my, of my work ethic is being attacked.
Yes.
So I'd say that would be how I'd start it. How it comes to a resolution, well, that's probably still to be determined. So
Great. I'm not sure how much time I have. Is there time for one more person, and then I'll wrap this up? And I hope that this is a valuable use of everyone's time. Is there someone else who would like to jump in as a last?
I wrote about a day at work also. This was a couple weeks ago, and what I needed that day was help. I needed help really badly. I was swamped and the phone wouldn't stop ringing, and I was just backed up and people kept walking in the door and I was freaking out. And yeah, I needed help. That was what I needed. I needed assistance. And so I texted my lovely friend, and she came over and answered the phone for me and cleaned my shop and helped calm me down for an hour and a half. And it was wonderful.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Also, very relatable. Absolutely. Well, Woodland Toastmasters, thank you so much. Again, I want to just say it's a real honor for me to be invited as a featured speaker tonight in what is clearly a very special moment for your club, reminiscing and celebrating and moving towards the future. And I wish you all the best of luck in your future Toastmasters endeavors and in your life, and bringing story to life because it enriches us all. Thank you.